We'd now like to explore and deliberate on winning in rural with the power of digital marketers lesson. And I'd like to invite Mr. Prabhakar Tiwari, ex-Chief Marketing Officer, PayU Payments Limited. Prabhakar Tiwari is currently working on his own startup idea to disrupt SMEs and startups ecosystem space worldwide. This IIM Bangalore graduate has passion for new learnings and sharing knowledge. He does voluntary work with Isha Foundation and Landmark Education in his free time. So may we please give him a round of applause as we welcome.
Namaskar, Ram Ram, good afternoon. It's my privilege to be speaking here. Thanks a lot, Sanjay, Nisha, and RMI team to inviting me today here. A short quiz. What's the link between Parachute, Danone, CEAT, and PayU? No points for guessing here because I worked on all these brands. And as you would guess, all these three brands have different degree of rural footprints. Like Parachute, you'll say it's dominant, and for PayU, it's non-existent at this moment, right? And that's how they are. So when I started preparing for this session today, and the demand is very high, it says marketeer lessons. And so that put a lot of job for people to think about what lessons can I give on such a complex subject. So I must admit that there are more inquiries area here for me. And from those inquiry areas, I have tried to glean out some lesson, which puts together my FMCG durable and now fintech experience together. So before I move further, let me start with the first inquiry area. And the first inquiry area for me is, has the marketeer noticed fundamental change in rural? If you have noticed how the debate of Bharat versus India has come mainstream from commerce to politics, have you noticed when they started using the word digital divide? Or have you noticed when your sales and marketing people were really fighting to define that town classification for that geographical segmentation you're looking for? And if the answer to these questions is yes, then yes, as a marketeer, you always notice the finer things. Now, if this is the setup, then there are multiple things which have changed in rural. And I will not talk about the infra and other bit because people have spoken about it. Let me talk about purchasing power. And when I talk about purchasing power, let me tell you what has changed fundamentally. The fundamental change is that today's rural youth living in village, all thanks to good infrastructure and low-cost biking with financing schemes from Bajaj or a Hero, is going to nearby urban, suburban town to work. And he gets some income out of that. And when he comes back to his village, he doesn't have to pay rent because he's living in a family house. And today the schooling and to some extent primary healthcare is almost free in rural. Now imagine however that meager income is, now that can fire up a lot of discretionary spends. And that's the kind of purchasing power we're talking about. The other aspect is about traditional mindset. Long time back when I used to work on brand Parachute and I went to Patna and a nearby village, and I was trying to figure out, and that time Parachute, America has not bought Nihar from HUL. And I was trying to talk to this Patna consumer and trying to shift him to like figuring out a way and how can I make this guy use Parachute. And I asked about like, आप Parachute इस्तेमाल क्यों करते हैं? And a very simple answer was, हमारे बाप दादा इस्तेमाल करते थे तो हम भी इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं. Now, that may not be logic for you, urban counterpart. That's a big logic for somebody in Patna. But believe you me, all thanks to exposure today, both digital and non-digital, the mindsets are changing very, very fast. So in that light, I tried to give it my own framework. Because the urban and rural definition, I can assure you that if there are 100 people in this room, there will be 100 definitions and all of them will be valid. It will also differ from category to category and whom you're asking. So let me give you a new definition, which takes away the need for urban and rural. Let me call it IC and AC. IC is inaccessible consumer, and AC is accessible consumer. So even if you're in Bombay, and you cannot reach your Dharavi consumer for whatever reasons, then that consumer segment is inaccessible. But if you're staying in that small Punjab village where they're buying Mercedes in bulk, then that's accessible consumer for you. So that's the power of this definition, inaccessible consumer and accessible consumer. And from this inquiry area, the lesson number 1 for me is that as a marketer, we have to focus on increasing our accessible consumer. That's the job, right? Forgetting about urban rural, how can we increase our percentage of accessible consumer? Now that brings me to my inquiry number 2. Is the business of winning any different in rural? Because if it is, then we're talking about new skill sets. But let me talk about this. Now increasingly what we are seeing that rural consumers are evolving in their notion of value. Now it involves aspects of price along with utility, aesthetic and feature, not just low prices. So if you see from that light, then the consumers are same everywhere. It's just the notion of value which you need to crack as a marketeer. Now, as I said, so we'll talk about winning here, right? So I thought let's use a basic fundamental model that all of us are comfortable with. We read it in our B schools like a decade back or 15 years back. And that model is AIDA model. Awareness, interest, desire, and action. While fundamentally it's a marketing communication model, but I am trying to reinterpret it as a business-oriented model. Now, AIDA first thing says awareness. Gone are the days when you used to make Excel sheet of media dark and media light states. Now, smartphones are everywhere at a prices with features that nobody has ever thought possible earlier, right? And not just that, like somebody talked about Kankhajura station here. I mean, imagine a feature phone could become so interesting that it can generate a lot of awareness and interest also, right? So that's for the awareness. Let's come to the interest bit. Now, when it comes to interest bit, I think rural consumer is no different. It's all about value proposition. It's all about drama. It's all about storytelling. Like today, when I go to social media forums, and I talk to many of such forums, I hear as if storytelling is like a big buzzword. I mean, I need to tell those people that storytelling is fundamental to this country. A long, long time back, our ancestors refused to commit anything to writing, saying that it will be misinterpreted, and they believed in Guru Shishya Parampara, and all they were doing is storytelling. And I can go on and on and on storytelling. But let me tell you simple stuff. It's all about to get that interest right, to find that unique, relevant, and ownable stories and formats. That's what we need to do, like the story that we saw of Lifebuoy. What a story it was. I mean, it's such a touching story, not just for rural consumer, for urban consumer also. So that's the kind of story we're talking about. Now, next thing is desire. Now, that could be easy, because rural people are given to their wild side. Okay, they are not very sophisticated, guarded like many of their urban counterparts. And so there my view is that if you can get the influencer of the community to adopt and advocate your product, then you have hit the jackpot. Think about the Mukhia of the Panchayat. Think about Gaon Ka Fauzi. Or think about that Pardesi Babu. All of them are the people, if you target them right and give them opportunities to sample your product, you've hit the big thing on desire. And last is action. Now, action is something you need to really, really understand. You need to be very clear what you want in action. In terms of, are you making your product accessible? Are you making it available at a pricing and payment options that they can leverage? And that's what this thing is. Now, coming to AIDA model, if this is the model, the fundamental of this model is the concept of touch points. Earlier, it was easier to do marketing in urban because the touch points were amazing and there were lots of touch points available. Now, the same touch points are available in rural. So we come to second number lesson number 2. The marketer should focus to convert the touch points to trust points for their brands. So can you convert a touch point to trust point for your brand? And if you can do that, then let me assure you winning is same. It is urban or rural, it doesn't matter. Okay? Now let's go to inquiry number 3, and that's the last inquiry. What's the contour of meaningful disruption in rural? Now, disruption is everywhere, and there are a lot of definitions. I mean, People who cannot differentiate their D from A will talk about disruption nowadays. So let me try my own definition on disruption. For me, innovation is creativity in action. That's innovation for me. And what's disruption? Disruption for me is accelerated innovation in practice. So disruption is all about accelerated innovation. You do not stop. Do not stop for things to settle down. You do one disruption, next day you do another innovation, and you keep doing that. And how can you do that? You can do that if you always focus on end consumer, value enhancement. Either you're enhancing pleasure point or you're reducing pain point. And while you're doing that, you have to give a complete disregard to the business and category you are in. You have to think from basic, that this is the consumer, this is the value they are seeking, this is the category we operate, how do we enhance pleasure points, and how do we reduce pain points? To this model, let me give you another framework. And to keep simple, I have decided to keep it the name same as ICAC. Now, stands for information. Now, imagine what can happen if you can start giving consumer the information. Think about eChoupal. I mean, they don't do anything drastic. I mean, that point of time, telling weather information, seed availability, lot of other stuff, they made an infrastructure, and then consumer did lot of stuff out of that. So even a single act of giving information can disrupt a market. And particularly on vernacular language interfaces. I mean, there are multiple language interfaces available. I mean, I can go on this topic because there are multiple technologies which are working simultaneously on this now. The second is community. Never forget the power of the community. I think Mr. Sridhar talked about the selfless bit, and that's where the community things come in. Because if you start leveraging community like your HUL, E-Shakti kind of model, the community can work wonders for you. The next A is affordability. And I have to choose this word very, very carefully because I had only one A to choose. And when I decided to define it, there are three things about affordability. Affordability. It starts from product design. It's very interesting, right? I mean, the time you design your product, you've already priced it in certain manner. So when you do something for rural, it's not about taking away features from your product and make it available in rural. It's about designing your product for rural. Like Godrej, Chotu Cool refrigerators. And they've done a concept on that. The next point about affordability is the pricing option. And pricing, of course, comes from product, and you know low-cost mobiles which are available, the Carbon Mobile, the Lava Mobile are changing the planet, even the Carbon Mobile. And I've heard these people, they have amazing plans for India and the rural India particularly. The last and most often looked thing about affordability is payment options. I come from e-commerce, fintech, and I can assure you that even Vortex kind of low ATM design can change the game. The concept of payment bank, which Bharti Airtel is getting into for financial inclusion, can change the game. And I can tell you concept like M-Pesa. Today, like a lot of people, like we talk about migrant population in Bihar working and earning for their families. Imagine their problems when they have to send that money back home. For whatever 6,000, 7,000 they're earning, they are saving almost like 4,500, 5,000 kind of money, living in very inhuman condition. But you know their biggest challenge? They have no safe way to make that rupees 4,500 reach to their family. There are no models available. I mean, the lady of the house has to cross such, dangerous zones to go and get that money. Anything can happen. She could be looted. Anything can happen. So affordability comes in, you have to think from product design, pricing, and payment options. And the last bit is collaboration. As somebody spoke in the first panel, that the problem is so vast. No single organization can do it. It's a matter of collaboration. You have to do a boundaryless behavior. So take, for example, the Flipkart, Snapdeal, they have signed up MOU with Government of India. You know, so that they can access the common service centers which government is developing as a part of Digital India. Let's talk about Mahindra Tractors, how they're trying to kind of line up with panchayats and local district administration.